Today's lecture is not going to be about issuance of condolences nor about sensationalizing this topic of floods. That has been done by one too many people. No amount of compensation can compensate for the lives lost. And neither am I going to take you on a subterranean journey of the various libraries which exist in Delhi. A lot of journalists, a lot of YouTube channels are onto it. We are going to stay professional. We are going to dwell upon the insights of the infrastructure in not just Delhi, but also other cities in India and all across the world. What made this conditions ripe for this disaster in the making? So obviously there is all over India, there is an impending chorus. Already there is a massive chorus for accountability, but things seldom change for the better. And to be honest, a few years back when I was a UPSC aspirant, I frequented the libraries of Mukherjee Nagar and Karol Bagh. I could very well have been at the receiving end of the ill-fated tragedy that's struck Delhi recently. So we need to swim into troubled waters, but beyond the blame games of desilting the drains between these political blames and whatever the political barbs are being exchanged between the different parties. So this is going to discuss various aspects, and in particular, I have studied in detail, no, not in detail by the Geological Survey or not in detail as much as the Meteorological Department, but I've tried to paint a holistic picture of what exactly is happening in India and the world. And I have researched a little about the topography of Delhi so as to analyze the reasons why this kind of tragedy or this kind of catastrophe is not going to be a one time affair. So, first of all, we need to understand what is urban flooding. See, floods have been taking place since time immemorial. The various civilizations, the Chinese civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, they all have borne the wrath of the floods. And the most natural cause is due to torrential rainfall, or when we just study about floods, when we consider floods as a general layman term, we say that the river, when it breaches its banks, when it breaches its channel in which it is flowing, then we call it as floods. But that is a natural way of the river to shed off its excess materials or excess silt and sand. But in urban floods, if we go by the exact definition of the urban floods, we can define urban flooding as the inundation or the flooding or of land or property in a built environment, in a concretized environment, particularly a place which is burgeoning with excess population and congestion, and that will always most often result in lack in loss of life and property, because urban areas, they're going to be people. Normally rivers keep flooding because of rainfall and all the natural factors, because of storm surges. But not only climate change, but the government as well as citizen apathy has made these disasters even worse. So consider the Vayanath floods recently. Again, there is a clamor for accountability. The you have not done this, you have not done that. But again, it was a disaster in the making, because the Western Ghats, it is a forested, it used to be a forested landscape, but various activities like cutting of hills, mining, and most importantly, the change in land use pattern, substitution of the forested area or landscape by monoculture or plantation culture. It has not only made the land bereft of the ability to seep in the water, to recharge groundwater, the surface runoff has increased. That is the problem. And we know, if yes, if you remember the biological and environmental studies in your school time, So these forests, they have deep roots, so they are able to hold the soil particles together. And because of their canopy and density, they prevent or mitigate the adverse effects of high precipitation or runoff. Not only runoff, they don't only hold the soil together, but if there are natural wetlands, natural ponds, natural lakes, so the ground, the natural ground is able to allow the seepage of the excess water instead of flowing at great speeds. Okay. And urban flooding can also be distinguished from flash floods. Flash floods, normally, if you attach the prefix flash, it means that it is associated with great speed, great intensity. So normally we have associated the flash floods, this term, like recently flash floods in Shimla, normally in hilly areas where the slope is steep. And again, rainfall is just a trigger. It's not prerequisite to landslide. In geographical terms, landslide is a type of mass wasting or mass movement. So it is simply a movement of loose rock, boulders, rubble, debris down a slope under the influence of gravity. But what happens if the soil is loose and excess rainfall takes place? Then, water acts as not only as a universal solvent but as a good lubricant. The friction between the loose soil above and the rocks, hard rocks or slope below, it decreases and it is able to flow more easily. Now, how can a landslide lead to the floods? Obviously, if there is water, there is there is water here, and suddenly huge amount of landslide, huge amount of boulders, clay, they fall. So obviously water is non-compressible, so water will be displaced and it will inundate or flood the low-lying areas. That is what happened in Wayanad recently, and that is what recently 1 or 2 days back happened in Shimla. Okay. So flooding of land, urban versus rural, again, rural land is not as concretized. So obviously, like I said, when we consider the land, the natural land versus the concretized lands where roads are there. So here, in case of natural lands, the water, although it's running off, whatever water is taking place, it is running off. This is the water which will increase the water level either in the river, or it will overwhelm the drainage capacity of a particular area, rural or urban. But due to loose ground, loose soil, non concretization, a significant proportion of water will also seep underground. So it will mitigate the effects, the adverse effects of flooding. Whereas in concretization, it is non-porous in nature. The buildings, the roads, asphalt surfaces, so they cannot at all mitigate the harmful effects, adverse effects of flooding. And moreover, what has been happening, even the green areas, the green spaces, I've talked about this in several lectures, the ponds, the wetlands, which not only allow the seepage and a barrier against the floods, but they also filter the harmful pollutants before the water it enters the groundwater level. Now, hardly at my time when I was young, I had the privilege of witnessing water drawn out with the help of a hand pump. Nowadays, they are extinct, even the wells are dry. So, similar example of these flood barriers in the coastal regions can be given above the mangroves, which have still prop roots. Okay, so these mangroves are also exploited, and moreover, not only because of cyclones. Now, natural causes, when we talk about, we'll discuss in detail also. So, natural causes, when we talk about, so one can be the storm surges or the cyclones, then other can be changing course of river. Okay, and third, torrential rainfall. Now, again, we often come across the news about this term cloudburst. Not every torrential or heavy rainfall event constitutes a cloudburst. IMD or Indian Meteorological Department has a specific definition for this cloudburst. We're not going to go that. So, storm surges cyclone. You know that as if this is the land surface, coastal land area, and here we have the water. So one thing you all must remember that cyclones are powered by the warm, moist winds, and due to the friction provided by the shallow land, these waves increase in length, and then they fall as surge, they inundate the land. Now, storm surges are the rise in water level which are beyond the normal level of the rise and fall of tides and ebbs. And because of climate change, more energy is being more energy, more power, more intensity is being provided to these waves, and the storm surges have also increased. So you can see now the anthropogenic causes and the natural causes behind flooding are not isolated from each other, and they need to be studied in a juxtaposed on simultaneously. Okay, so that is why urban flood peaks, they are 1.8 to 8 times above what takes place in rural. Rural areas are also prone to floods. Fine, rapid onset. So urban flooding occurs very quickly and impact. So people living in vulnerable areas, they loss of life and even exposure to infections. Now this is not supposed to be funny, but when the floods, Delhi floods, massive floods took place in 2023, so a lot of reporters to sensationalize or obtain more views so that more people would log in and view what hard work they are doing, they intentionally submerge themselves in water, and then they made this mockery of government and blamed whatever the infrastructure is there. Obviously government sources, we have a three tier government. So there is MCD also in Delhi, MCD the state government, and it's a union territory also. So all should work in tandem, in collaboration, in cooperation. That is important. So impact of urban flooding, again, loss of life and property, disruption of city operations, obviously electricity, roads, waterlogging. So damage to environment, the vegetation is flown away. Now in Delhi, you hardly seem to witness any vegetation. But still, whatever little vegetation, parks, grounds, greenery is there. So that vegetation, that biodiversity, then psychological trauma. This is very important. Even you study all over, even not only because of disasters, but because of studying. For studies for UPSC, there is so much pressure. Like a lot of reports have been there recently when we are talking about the subterranean or the libraries in basement, which has been a serious drive has been enforced to seal those illegally running libraries. So there is a loss of stress, the environment, the atmosphere. So this is a serious note. And like I said, again, no compensation can fulfill the loss of lives which have already taken place. Okay, so causes. This is an important topic. So, like I have already discussed some of the topics, mostly the natural causes. Now, the anthropogenic causes have become much more important as compared to the natural one, and they have also worsened the already adverse effects of the natural causes. So, as you can see in the diagram, so here, first of all, encroachment of water bodies. And I'm not talking about encroachment of only ponds, lakes like Belandur in Bengaluru, or the lack of interconnectivity of lakes. These drains or these nullas, which we say, or these small rivulets. In Delhi also, we know that there is only one river, Yamuna, but there's small rivers also, like Sahibi river. Okay, then other drains also, the Najafgarh drain. So these are also responsible for carrying water. Now, if you pile construction or buildings over that drain, so that natural flow will be obstructed, no matter how much you try to streamline it. So whenever massive rainfall takes place, not only is there debris, sewage and pollution to block the flow of excess water. So where will be the water, excess water go? It will flood onto the land. Then mining, this sand mining. There is an example of Jaisamand Lake in Jodhpur. Examples are also essential, especially from the examination point of view. So this sand mining, mining of quartz. So this also disturbs the natural balance or natural ecosystem of the river waters, their capacity to filter out the pollutants, their capacity to allow the seepage of water into the ground. Okay. Then unplanned release of water from dams. Now, dams and reservoirs are important for managing and mitigating and adaptation towards the harmful effects of floods, but obviously a rainfall, when torrential rainfall, heavy downpour takes place, there is a certain threshold after which the dam, it will be necessary for the dam to release water, or else it will be damaged. So that unplanned release of water, like a few years back, there was a unplanned release of water from Nepal, so it inundated the low-lying areas of Bihar. Okay, then of course torrential rainfall is there. Torrential rainfall, floods due to torrential rainfall have been are not new, but they have been exacerbated due to climate change. We have discussed in one of my earlier lectures about the urban heat island effect. So this effect due to intense convection of moist air and formation of clouds in an isolated area when the water vapor reaches a dew point, so it falls under gravity. A short duration of high rainfall which overwhelms the storm sewers and the capacity of the drains to allow the rivers to. Then we have red tapeism. Fine. Blame games keep on taking place. For example, in Delhi, the drainage plan is decades old. It has not been rejuvenated. In Mumbai, also same is the case. In Mumbai, there is a minor river. If we compare to rivers like Ganga, Godavari, Brahmaputra, it is a Mithi river. So whenever waterlogging takes place because Mithi River, the drainage is not adequate, and obviously torrential rainfall, climate change. So all these factors have to be kept in mind. Okay, then sand mining we have discussed, deforestation we have already discussed, that capacity of the soil. Basically, deforestation, one of the primary reasons behind landslides. And when landslides or loose sediments, raw materials, they fall into the water already brimming under the torrential rainfall. So, haphazard construction in Pune. In Pune, there are hills which have been cut. So, deforestation takes place in Chennai. The second runway of the international airport has been constructed over the Adyar River. You might have heard about the Katraj Hills, and there are local rivers like Musi, which is a significant river for Hyderabad. So Hyderabad also lies in a saucer-shaped area. So already if the hills are cut, if slopes are there and suddenly rainfall takes place, all the boulders there, and this inundation because of the lack of seepage, the excess runoff of water, the low-lying areas get inundated. In Mumbai, the Brian Mumbai, the municipal corporation, they have come across several with plans to mitigate or plan ahead with stormwater drainage plans, but that those have not been implemented properly. Okay. Then wetlands, main causes the interconnectivity why Bengaluru always faces floods as well as droughts because of lack of interconnectivity of the lakes, not only drains. So Bilandur lake is always in the news, and recently traffic, just a fact, I am reading about this Hebbal flyover in Bengaluru. So in order to cover 4 kilometers, it takes 1 hour. So in Google Maps, they show that walking takes less time. So these are related in one way or the other. Okay, so this is one of the infographics which I came across to give you a brighter, better picture of what things are taking place. So this basically, Delhi population was in the news that it is bound to grow exponentially in the coming years, and at one point of time, within the next 5 or 10 years, it will overtake the population of Tokyo. But Tokyo is a much better managed city. These days, the Japanese countries, China, was under the adverse impact of the cyclone Gaimi. Okay, it is also known as Karina. Philippines, typhoons in the Western Pacific Ocean. Then, so Delhi, these three major flood events have taken place since 2000, and this 62% of the water bodies have been lost. Now, I talked about a river. The river basically, so here, if we see the Yamuna river flowing through Delhi, and we know that floodplains are naturally formed by the rivers where they deposit their sediments. And if in these floodplains you create infrastructure, you create Commonwealth Games village, you create metro sheds, so what will happen? This is already loose soil and it is already prone to floods. What will happen? Similarly, this infographic, it details the effects or the status of floods in other areas also, in other important cities. Okay, so some of the stats, some we have already discussed, so I'm just going to reiterate or repeat. So 13 centimeters of rainfall in Bengaluru's Rainbow Drive, worst floods in 15 years. So it can either be absorbed or allowed to drain. So both of the functions, the stormwater drains are overwhelmed. Even so much rainfall is taking place that the stormwater drains are overwhelming. So even the water that is entering the drains, that is being re-released onto the roads, does inundating the land or the concretized establishments. And it is also because of roads, it is not able to seep down. Okay. Then catastrophic rainfall, Mandi, Kullu, Manali, Shimla in Himachal Pradesh recently 1 or 2 days back again. This sort of picture, was in news then. In July 26, 94.4 centimeters and deaths and loss of livelihood. And another impact, how can you associate? Now, this Mumbai local trains, they are the lifeline, lifeblood of the Mumbai economy. They also come to a standstill. Then in Kerala witnessed one of the most adverse floods in 2018. That was also one of the landslides, and you can see this is an image of the floods in Kerala. In Wayanad, the major culprit is the deforestation and subsequent landslides, and then the rainfall acted as a trigger. Now, this is a very interesting infographic, not infographic, actually, I created this map. It was very time consuming to locate areas, so I'm going to try to highlight the important areas. Okay, so you might have you heard of this term urban sprawl? So in history we often read that Delhi is already a congregation or assimilation of 8 medieval erstwhile cities, some of them like Shahjahanabad, Tughlaqabad. So what is interesting about that? This brown area, if you can see, this is the remnant of the Aravali's, the Delhi Alwar Ridge, an extension of the Aravali Hill. We often call it the Ridge area also. So you can see some areas, erstwhile cities like Tughlaqabad, this Tughlaqabad indicated by a fort. Then this civil lines area, Shahjahanabad. Okay, Red Fort is also nearby, but it was also flooded in the 2030. It is not exactly on an elevated area, but here when you see the floodplain area, this is River Yamuna and this is the floodplain area. Out of this, some areas are elevated areas, like civil lines, a little elevated. Civil lines also bore the brunt of the floods. But this Kashmiri Gate metro shed on the floodplains, built on the floodplains, ITO, Pragati Maidan, and often what is observed, this Sarai Khale Khan, bustling a bustling urban village, a lot of drains, like I said, they are permeating all through the Delhi landscape. So sometimes what happens is the rainfall which is taking place in as far as RK Puram or Chanakyapuri, they converge at Sarai Khale Khan, and the slope difference in slope is up to 100 meters also in some areas. So due to this extensive slope, they accumulate, or the flow of water is directed and it accumulates in areas such as Sarai Kale Khan. These are just for reference. Other areas, the Safdarjung Airport, cantonment area was built on. This is the railway station, but cantonment area is much larger area built on a slightly elevated land. Then Mehrauli, okay. So these areas you can see that these have been built on relatively elevated land. So we should, instead of trying to fight over renaming the Harappan civilization to Indo Saraswati, Indus Saraswati civilization, we to take cue from that civilization, because we know that every city was prone to floods, but the management, the drain system in that, and even from these medieval cities which we have talked about. So we should take cues or some. These are this is the Sahibi River. Okay, here Sahibi River. Here we have Mukherjee Nagar also, another important UPSC hub. Okay, and this is the ill-fated Rajendra Nagar. So this you can see whenever it is in close area, close proximity to ridge. So it is a low-lying area, saucer-shaped area. So whenever torrential rainfall takes place, it is highly vulnerable. So even if you seal the basements, so it is prone to flooding. And I was talking about urban sprawl. Now this is the NCT, or the National Capital Territory of Delhi. It is different from NCR. So Delhi NCR, National Capital Region. It consists of the adjoining cities of different states like Rohtak. Then we have Badurgarh here, Gurgaon, Faridabad, Noida, Ghaziabad. So what is happening is these were primarily rural or semi-urban areas. So the water was carried through various rivulets originating from Aravlis and other areas, and these were able to seep into the ground, or the absorptive capacity. The storm water drains were sufficient to cope with the high torrential rainfalls or high surface runoff. Now what is happening? The number of people have increased, high congestion, population, again concretization. So again, you can know Gurgaon also one of the major hotspots of flooding. This is an illustration of this is the Minto Bridge, named after Lord Minto, one of the viceroys of British India, and this is again in a depression, saucer-shaped structure. So even when small amount of rainfall takes place, so this gets inundated. These black lines indicate the highways, basically, just for additional information, because I'm a geography enthusiast. So this is basically NH44, which goes all the way to Amritsar and Jammu, and then this is NH9, often known for its high traffic. It goes to the Rohtak Bahadurgarh uh, city. Okay, and then this famous always traffic clock, the NH48 to Gurgaon and further, and this here is the NH19. To some additional information. So this now I think, because of the, so when planning is made, not only are we going to desilt the drainage systems, we also have to take into account the lithology, the soil profile, the topography, the elevation, so as to make suitable plans, apt plans to take the excess water away from the low-lying areas. So that is why it is necessary to study these things. Okay, Delhi, so rapidly growing city, almost doubled from 90, and still it is growing to grow exponentially. It is bound to overtake Tokyo. Then topography. So I talked about this Tughlaqabad, Mehrauli, Shahjahanabad, civil lines, concrete everywhere. And moreover, they have been dumped pollutants because we Indian citizens are so responsible. No water master plan, outdated master plans, climate change, hyperlocal, the urban heat island effect. In in hilly areas, we associate the torrential downpour, the flash floods with cloudburst or even glacial calving. I had discussed this concept in one of my lectures on glacial lake outburst flood in Sikkim, the floods, the Lunak Lake. Encroachments, so nullas, rivulets, so they are not only polluted but they are blocked as well. They are encroached, they are built upon. So way forward, again, as the structure has been with my lecture, so we have discussed what the issue is, where the problem lies, what has been causing the issue, what is the status of the issue, and what has to be the way forward. So some novel techniques, like we know waste management, of course, waste management is very important. Then water management is very important. Blue green infrastructure. So these might appear as fancy terms, not as fancy terms as our authorities give to various schemes. Anyways, PM Shri was in news, so you can study for the exams point of view. So blue green means blue refers to water, so interconnectedness of water bodies, proper cleaning, less encroachment, all the holistic things to be combined in blue infrastructure from what we have discussed in the previous slides. Green infrastructure, the green spaces, the wetlands, urban roofs, bioswales. So you can just note these terms. So blue green infrastructure together can help in the establishment and maintenance of sustainable cities. Then proper drainage, repairing of drainage system to analyze the leakages where they exist. The main hole should be covered. This is also children falling in main manholes. That is no surprise. So proper drainage connectivity. So and filtration system should be there so that the pollutants, excess salt or silt does not deposit in the groundwater on the underground flowing. The sewage does not get accumulated in those underground drains so as no so they don't impede the flow of water. Then this is a very important concept, sponge city. So sponge city, you can say it is similar to blue green infrastructure, and because of all these ailments which affect or which frequent these cities, these urban cities. So this spawn city concept becomes very important. And from the, even if you don't know the definition, this by the method of sponge, like for cleaning, we know use the sponge, so it absorbs the excess water. So similarly, one of the pioneers of sponge cities, China. Various pilot projects are running. Singapore. So 34 hectares of urban. So they look like this. So they have both green spaces, green roofs, urban spaces, greener, healthier urban spaces. So not only for the sustainable development, not only for the physical, to reduce the harmful effects, to reduce the disaster risk from floods and other, but also the spiritual growth. Spiritual growth. These days in urban areas, people hardly know each other. Yeah, I am no exception to that. Flood risk is reduced, and obviously it cannot be eliminated, but the loss to livelihood and property can be reduced. Water savings, and you might have heard of grey water. Okay, so that is a polluted water. The water treatment plant should be properly. Like recently, there was some debate or controversy over the water treatment plant in Okla some time back. You can read about it. And the citizens can be incentivized to recycle and prevent wastage of water by maybe increasing the tariffs. But that won't be a popular decision in a place like Delhi, anyways. So groundwater makes cities more permeable and able to absorb water. And all this will help in the flourishing of biodiversity. Maybe we'll get to see various different kinds of birds, different kinds of animals. Not I'm not talking about wild animals, but still. So this NDMA, National Disaster Management Authority, is very important. Again, blame game was there after this tragedy took place in Rajendra Nagar. That instead of the firemen or the firefighters, which were called as first preference, the Disaster Management Authority officials should have been invited to the spot. So again, this keeps on. So some structural and non-structural methods, like we have already talked about reservoirs, dams. Okay, we already embankments and flood walls. This is basically for the areas like the Yamuna, major rivers. So obviously, if you are building in the floodplains, so that is not going to help your cause. Drainage improvement, desilting and dredging of rivers. We have already discussed. So this is a desilting process going on in Chennai, near Chennai Metro. I live in a place where the drains are cleaned and whatever garbage or sludge or sewage is taken out, it is just taken out and deposited on the road so that traffic congestion takes place. Moreover, whatever these protective suits which should be provided to this scavengers, the human scavengers, they are not being provided, so health concerns are also there. Afforestation catchment areas, so that is very important. Diversion of flood water. Non-structural zoning, that we should normally build away from the flood prone areas, flood proofing. So these are plans. Integrated watershed management, I've talked about this. So it consists of various things, like embankments are there, alley cropping are there, mixed cropping are there, livestock is maintained. So they use the essential outcome of this is to prevent the disaster, prevent or reduce the disaster risk arising from floods. So this is a sort of infographic which demonstrates the planning. So here we can see that if this is a water body, so we don't need to concretize the area. This poses a very high flood risk to this area. So we can have agriculture, recreation, open space, green spaces. Okay. So even if flood takes place, this part of land is inundated. So loss is not there significant. So flood, then small houses, then commercial standard single story houses, critical utilities. So they should obviously not be near the floodplains. So finally, as the trend has been important from the competition point of view, exams point of view, these two questions, this is from, I'm sorry, this is from GS3. This is from GS3 2016, and this is 2020 GS1. So you can, so flood is a very common topic. It is not to be taken lightly, especially in lieu of the recent happenings and the disasters. So we'll try to write an answer for one of the questions to discuss the issue. So first of all, we can write the definition, a proper healthy definition, which I have already told you, that it is inundation of properties or land, especially in the low-lying areas, and especially which are habitated with a lot of congestion, congested, it is highly congested, lack of stormwater drainage, and this high, you can write it in your own words, this high torrential downpour, it overwhelms the drainage system capacity. It either runs off, it is not seeped off, or either it is blocked, it overwhelms the stormwater drainage capacity. And body, again different, so you have to issue and various causes and measures. So there are essentially two parts. So one, you can give the subheading as causes. A lot of causes we have already discussed. So one, you can divide it in further subheading, two subheadings. So one is the natural causes. So one is the natural causes. For example, the changing course of river. Example can be Kosi. Recently, an example was the Bal Ganga river also, which inundated the Tehri land, Tehri area. Then storm surges, cyclone. You have to be aware of the recent examples. Gaimi, Cyclone Ramal, which inundated parts of West Bengal. Haiyan was a severe typhoon few years back. Okay, and torrential rainfall, cloudburst. So you need not remember all the points. You can elaborate. It is already 250 words. And then anthropogenic, lots of issues we have already discussed. Encroachment, you can give examples, plenty of examples we have discussed. Then we can say the pollution, then government apathy, citizen ignorance, lack of planning. Okay, then unplanned release of dam water, then illegal mining. You can give examples. Deforestation, because it is directly or indirectly connected to this. Okay, and then measures you can brainstorm somewhat. So we have these pond cities or blue green infrastructure, maintenance of drainage system, farming plans, collaboration involving NGOs, all stakeholders. People should be made aware, awareness campaigns. And one important point, use of geospatial mapping or geospatial technology like Indian based Bhuvan. Okay, so it can help map, like I showed you satellite image of Delhi, so similar. So you can, again, the main challenge, these points some or the other you will remember, everybody will be able to write, but you can be innovative in introduction as well as conclusion. So conclusion which spontaneously comes to my mind is that flood management, you can write like this: flood management is not only about DRR or disaster risk reduction, it is more about development or developing sustainable and smart cities. Indian government initiatives, you can also write about Amrut, the Atal Mission for Rejuvenation and Urban Transformation. So although the ground realities might be different, but it is an initiative nonetheless. So I hope for the benefit or safeguarding humanity, life and property, these situations, these impending and recurring perennial disaster situations, they are remedied, rectified to somewhat. Don't fall prey to this sensationalism, because ultimately after some time people will not care. Right now there is a lot of clamor over this issue, but what we need is a proper educational understanding, which I always aim at giving you. So with that, stay safe, stay healthy, and Jai Hind.